What is up, guys? John Claymore here, and we are back with another one of those. Let's talk about where these bad ideas in society come from, especially American society. And of course, we're talking about the wokes and the white liberals. Now, guys, before you have a debate between Styx, and Hammer and a Swedish lady named Lar. Now, Lar is a socialist, all right? Now, she recently moved to the United States. Well, actually, she didn't recently move to the United States. She moved to the United States in 1984. And the reason why I'm bringing this topic up about cities, rural areas, and small towns is because there's this great big giant disconnect between small town America and, of course, big town America. Big town America, of course, is where most of the liberals live at. Small town America is where most of the conservatives live at, which, by the way, we're going to touch on race a little bit in this video. Now, guys, before we get started, this video right here, I'm going to post the timestamps of when I actually, let's just say what parts in the debate that I actually interject. By the way, after this small section rolls, I'm going to give you guys some more of my 2 cents on the actual issue itself because we got to get to some actual numbers. Diversity is going to be discussed in this video, as well as the raw numbers, estimates on exactly how many people live in America per actual area, meaning rural versus urban. Also, something else too, we're going to talk about the Swedish demographics because, as you guys can see, this lady right here is very, very white. And of course, she assumes that she knows a lot when in reality she knows a lot that, quite frankly, just is not true. Another thing that we're going to be speaking about is why people are actually leaving the big cities, and there's two issues, gentrification and, of course, crime. Now, I'm not much on gentrification, but we may do a project at a later date. But that's actually what the meat of this discussion is. Of course, you see critical race theory debate up in the left-hand corner, which is discussed. And I will be leaving the actual full debate in the description box of this video. And we'll probably come back to this debate at a later point in time to discuss the actual topic of race itself. Now, with that out of the way, I'm going to go ahead and roll the next 2.5 minutes so we get to our actual point, and then we're going to go ahead and break this down and exactly why it is that, yeah, liberals just don't get people. And of course, we are going to be going back to Jonathan Haidt and his actual book, The Righteous Mind, where he spoke about how liberals did not understand conservatives or moderates, but moderates and conservatives obviously understand liberals. Let's go ahead and roll this.
Were undervalued.
And what does that have to do? Because what does that have to do with the people moving in? The black neurosurgeon makes $250,000 a year.
I understand. Your example is a class only has to do with class. I understand that. Wealth has to do with wealth. But in America, black neighborhoods were in reality something that existed and is comes from segregation. Just because segregation was over didn't mean all of a sudden, everybody mixed up. Everybody got together and grew up. You live in Europe. There are poor neighborhoods and rich neighborhoods in Europe, but you don't go into a neighborhood and you go, oh, there's only black people here. Oh, there's only Chinese people here.
No, I would disagree with that. You might want to go to the Balmer in Amsterdam, which is being gentrified, by the way. And the crime rate is going down as a result of this gentrification.
Now, guys, really quick. Styx is actually from rural Vermont. Okay, so he actually has dual citizenship. If you're not familiar with Styx, I'll leave a link to his channel in the description box or the comment section. The thing that they've been discussing is whether it actually curbs crime. They're discussing that in this debate, and eventually they do get on the guns. It's one of the main reasons why I'm leaving the actual full debate in the comment section. I figured I would interject there right quick. With that being said, let's go ahead and watch the next minute and a half, and I'll come right back.
Could the same thing also be said of the Appalachians versus the WASPs in the United States, where a lot of poor people who were living in the Appalachia region were within that particular culture, and they are still in that particular culture for the most part? There wasn't as much of a growth towards the same levels of eliteness. So I don't know, would that be another example that doesn't really talk about race as much as class and just certain cultural things being passed on?
Yes, but I think that in America there's a particular urbanization of how racial groups were living, working, and communicating with each other. And I don't think that in 2022, it's much different than when I first discovered America, 35 years ago.
Now, guys, really quick, I got to interject just for a second. This lady Laura is not what we call. I would say she's very ignorant of the issue. Let me go ahead and explain this because this is kind of the premise of the video. Laura moved to Brooklyn, New York in 1984. She is from Sweden. Now, guys, let me go ahead and pull up Sweden's actual racial demographics. As you can see right here, for the most part, it's 80% white. That demographic is actually the whiteness has actually decreased over the last 30 years. That's what Sweden is now. So for the most part, she's been mostly around white people. Now, anyone who's, and by the way, I'm not doing this video to make fun of anybody who lives in big cities. Trust me, I got guys I serve with, friends of mine who live in big cities. And they'll tell you that the bigger cities, for the most part, are somewhat community organized, okay? African Americans, Hispanics mostly live in much, much poorer areas. You do have your poor white class, but at the same time, though, you also have your more wealthier whites and wealthier African Americans. Not that many of them who live in much, much more suburban type areas. Now, the thing that you have to understand is that once you get outside the city, you find out that things are a little bit more diverse. I'll give you an example of what I mean. North Carolina right now is sporting over 20% African Americans as far as its diversity is concerned, actual percentage. Some states, of course, Vermont being one of those, is only about 2 or 3% black. New Hampshire is only about 2 or 3% black. New York, most of the African American population lives within the city itself, where in Pennsylvania, most of the African American population lives in Pittsburgh and lives in Philadelphia, those two cities alone. Fact of the matter is that most of these areas are actually community organized, and of course she lives in New York or Brooklyn, New York. Also, one more thing too, and Styx made light of this earlier in the debate that this isn't exactly a poor chick. I mean, look at that fireplace behind her, stone, brick, mortar. It looks to me like she's pretty well off, if you ask me. This is the mindset that a lot of woke white liberals have, and they don't seem to realize that the large reason why it's like it is the way it is in these cities is because, well, they traditionally have Democrats running it. You see, Democrats are more of the, I'll put it this way here. You can't convince me that Democrats ain't racist. Every time you turn around, the communities are always segregated. Where I live at here, the community is not segregated at all. I live in an apartment complex with whites and blacks both. And of course, I also have Hispanics in this neighborhood as well. Fact of the matter is that when you get to red areas, they're much, much more diverse. We will come back to this in just a second. So let's go ahead and roll some more.
But you were in New York City, right?
I was in New York City, yes.
Did you ever go out to like the hinterlands, like where I'm from, where we grow our horseradish? Did you ever come around these here yonder parts with the general store?
So I also lived in Massachusetts. Is that close enough to you?
Which
Massachusetts. Massachusetts is another very, very white place. Outside of Boston, Massachusetts is pretty freaking white. I mean, do I need to bring up the Irish versus Italians? Let's keep this going.
city? It depends.
Waltham, Massachusetts.
Okay, is that a
Outside
suburb of
Boston? Yes, it's
Yeah.
a suburb of.
Suburb of Boston? Yeah, definitely white.
So you've been in an urban or a suburban enclave of urban area. Have you ever spent an extended period of time living in small town or extremely rural America, like out in the mountains or something?
No. I
Okay,
have
so
not.
then your experience is going to be different from those of us who actually have been dirt poor and living in the middle of nowhere. To us, something like white privilege or CRT is a joke, number one. And to us, number two, the problems of the city slickers or flatlanders, as Vermonters tend to call them, aren't the same problems that we have. If you come to small town Vermont, you're going to see an awful lot of wood-sided general stores with people that look suspiciously like they like to play banjos a little bit too much. They're not going to disrespect you because of the color of your skin unless you're acting up. And if you're white, they're going to treat you just the same. It's entirely different than the kind of urban enclaves that you get in New York City. You have a specifically extremely segregated style of system. I would admit to this, but extremely segregated. You have people of Irish extraction living here, people of Japanese extraction, people of Chinese extraction, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, Mexican, Argentinian, whatever. You have these different sort of enclaves, these hubs within the city. You don't really see that if you go outside of the city. I wish that people that came from Europe, as you did, would go outside of the big cities and the suburbs just for once and see what life is really is for 90% of people in the United States, because it's completely different. You'd
I don't think
probably
it's-
change your mind.
I don't think.
Really quick, before we play her response and before we get to these actual stats, I want to go ahead and throw this out here. Most Europeans, and by the way, this is not a knock on Europeans. I'm just simply stating, and of course, somebody's going to say that this right here is strictly anecdotal, but I got to throw this out here. Most Europeans, when they come to the United States, they think about New York, they think about Chicago, they think about Miami, they think about much, much larger cities. Well, what Styx was saying just now is 100% true. Most of these bigger cities, the actual living areas, are for the most part pretty well segregated. Okay, right now you've had this Stop Asian Hate thing going on for a while, and people try to say it was white people when in reality it was black people who were actually warring with Asians. Now, the thing is this right here: when some of these communities intermingle, or some of these communities attempt to try to intermingle, oftentimes conflict occurs because these people are naturally racist against one another. I just figured I'd go ahead and throw that out here. And a lot of white liberals, especially white Europeans who come over here, and by the way, and I've got to kind of throw this out here, this woman is a socialist. So you left socialism coming to America, and now you've been living here for over 30 years, and now you kind of sort of want socialism back. Well, actually, she's been living for close to 40 years. Yeah, these people are really and truly ignorant. Now, guys, I'm going to run the rest of this, and then we're going to come back to these actual facts towards the end. I'm going to give you guys my overall analysis.
90% of the United States, considering most of Americans live in big cities. But
False. In urban areas, define urban. Small town America is technically defined as urban. My hometown, Rutland City, is defined as urban. There's nothing urban about it.
Okay,
Tallest building we have is 7 stories.
So I lived in
Not
a
urban.
city that was 40 miles away from Baltimore City, and it had 11,000 people. And
For how long?
9 years.
Okay.
So
Was it a wealthy enclave?
It was not a wealthy enclave. It was a mixed, so racially mixed town with
The mere fact that her eyes keep going up as she keeps on saying kind of tells me that she's not being fully honest with the crowd.
a school called the Colored School. So it had a old African American community there. The school's now a museum, and it had a very good mix of rich and poor people.
That's wonderful.
Yes.
Of course, Styx is being a bit of a smart ass there. Okay, guys, let's go ahead and kind of break this last part down, okay? Simple Google search can fix a lot of this. Okay, so what percentage of the U.S. population is actually rural? According to the last study, it looks like 17.9%, so basically 18%. It's estimated roughly right around 60 million people. Now, by definition of rural, what we mean is someone who lives, quote-unquote, in the sticks. Like, for example, me, I live in a town in eastern North Carolina that's got about 115,000 people who live in it. I moved here from another town that had about 5,000 people, and I lived out in the country. Now, before that, I lived in a town that had about 30,000 people. And, of course, being the United States Marine Corps, being stationed at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, I was in an area that had about 50 or 60,000 people. We could probably give or take more, especially being a Marine town. I figured I'd go ahead and get that out of the way. Okay, what percentage of the U.S. population is urban versus rural? Now, this guy over here is a little bit earlier, but urban areas make up about 3% of the entire land. I could show you this clip right here that we like to use for congressional purposes. When we talk about congressional maps, the Clinton Archipelagos, of course, the blue coastal cities. Only about 3% of the actual landmass itself, which, by the way, is mostly bigger cities. Now, conversely, 97% of the country's landmass, of course, is rural, but only 19.3% of the population lives. And by the way, this is one that came out before the previous one that I read. Hold on, let me double check that. Yeah, I'm kind of off the fly here. This is basically an updated one, or August 2017. I know I'm kind of goofing it here, but it is what it is. Now, today the U.S. Census Bureau released its latest population. Don't worry, I'll be leaving these links in the description box. The latest population estimates for cities and towns, and they reveal most of the nation's population lived in unincorporated places. Now, guys, incorporated places are places like not where I live at now, but like where I'm from, small town North Carolina. I don't like to give away the actual town itself. Of course, the town is about 30,000 people. Some of these towns range from 4,000 to even 20 to 30, or in my case now, right around 115,000. I'll give you another example. Green Bay, Wisconsin. I love to cite it because my favorite football team plays there, and yeah, we suck right now. 115,000 people live in Braun County, Wisconsin. That's Green Bay. It's oftentimes considered to be small town USA. I just figured I would throw that out there. Okay, now are more people moving to small towns? An increasing number of people are moving to small towns in rural America. In part, take advantage of the cheaper housing. This is a part of the reason why, of course, this was brought up with gentrification. Like I said, we'll probably do a separate project on gentrification at a later date. But the thing you have to understand that one of the main reasons why people are leaving these areas, of course, is crime. The massive amount of crime right now in bigger cities. Now, many people are thinking that some very, very deep blue places like New York, for example, they may flip this time around because of the crime. I'm not so sure. I'm a little bit skeptical about that. As a matter of fact, I may even release a midterms predictions video from behind the camera. But I'm a little bit skeptical of that. Either way, that people are leaving because of crime. Now, you got to understand something right quick. There's a nice little thing that people like to say. Like to say that people who are coming from blue areas are going to be voting blue in red areas. That is not always true. If you want to get an actual indication of that, the best thing you can do is go to the U.S. Census. If a person is moving from a rural area or a small town to a big town, chances are it's probably not going to affect the way they vote, okay? They're probably going to be the same. However, if somebody's moving from a big city to another big city within the state, they're bringing their politics with them. If they're moving from a big city to a suburb, they're bringing their politics with them. If they're moving from a big city to a small town, it's possible they may not be bringing their politics with them. You never ever judge a book by its cover, and we've actually got some data, which, by the way, we'll get into in a later video, that's showing that the opposite is occurring. A lot of people who are moving from the Midwestern sections, of like, say, Texas, for example, they're actually voting Republican. It's mostly the Californians who are voting Democrat. But then again, there's a lot of Californians, from what we understand, that are being polled in Florida who are saying that they'll be voting Republican this midterm cycle. Now, other things that we got to get into, demographic and economic trends. This comes from the Pew Research Center. Let's take a look at these graphs really quick. Shrinking area of Americans in rural areas. As you guys can see, you're already seeing this percentage over here on the left. Of course, my mouse just died on me. I'm doing this basically raw. But you guys are actually looking at this. I'm leaving this up for you. All right, population aging in all towns. Of course, some of these areas are getting also a little bit older too. Okay, you guys are seeing all this. I just figured I'd pop this up here, let you guys kind of make what you want to make out of it. Suburbs growing more rapidly in rural and urban areas. Now, this right here is the key. Population growth in rural counties since 2000 has trailed in other areas. As you guys can see, more and more people from the previous graphs are moving from the bigger cities to smaller cities and smaller areas and moving to suburbs. Now, we'll be doing more content on a later date, but let's go ahead and read this. About 46 million Americans live in the nation's rural counties, 175 million in its suburbs and small metros. Now, guys, what's a small metro? We'll use a town like Wilson, North Carolina, or maybe a town like Greenville, South Carolina. That's a relatively small metro compared to some of the bigger cities. Fact of the matter is that small town America, for the most part, dominates the country as far as its actual population. Most Europeans think that everywhere in the United States is a big city, when that right there is not the case. She even looked a little bit repulsed when he brought up rural areas. And as I mentioned before, if you looked at her actual eyes and the way they were actually going up in the air, she kind of couldn't tell. She couldn't really think exactly. It's like I said, I don't think she was being completely honest during this debate. But this right is part of the divide. Matter of fact, let me go ahead and finish reading this small part right quick. 175 million in its suburbs and small metros, 98 million in its urban core counties. Of course, New York, Miami, Chicago. As a group, the population in rural areas grew 3% since 2000. Less than their 8% growth in the 1990s. Urban county population rose 13% since 2000. And the population in suburban and smaller areas actually went up 16%. Growth rate somewhat higher than in the 90s. The share of U.S. residents who live in rural areas declined in the 1990s since 2000, but rose in suburban counties during both periods and held steady. Now, my theory is that a lot of people who are being gentrified out, they're moving out of the bigger cities into small cities. Reason why is obviously because of cheap property. I think a lot at the same time, I think all of it has also got to do with crime as well. It's typically the white people who leave mostly due to crime and African Americans who leave mostly due to population size. Now, here is the demographics one more time of this lady's home country, Sweden. 80.3% Sweden. By the way, she's like in her 60s, so you already know that she lived at least the first 30 years of her life in Sweden. 1.9%, close to 2% Syrian. Iraqis 1.4, Finnish 1.4, others 15%. Not a lot of people of color in the country of Sweden. Okay, it's just not a lot of people in the country of Sweden. Now, the actual demographics in red states versus blue states, This right here will actually be a topic for another day. I brought this up earlier, but I wanted to go ahead and kind of throw that out there. And of course, we're going to be doing a video on that. Now, guys, I'm going to go ahead and end the video here. But here's the thing. There's going to be a project out soon about the difference between liberals and conservatives as far as like where they're actually from, what they actually have to deal with on a daily basis. We're going to be releasing that video here in the near future. I haven't actually got a date on that. But I figured I wanted to go ahead and talk about this topic because we do need to find and we do need to identify the misconceptions of American society that other people have. This lady right here is European. She's been living in New York. She's obviously never left New York except gone to another suburban area, which I don't even know if she even knows the difference. She's probably in a very rich, wealthy area and probably doesn't even realize that. But we're going to be doing more topics on this because we have to actually try to find the actual divide in our society and why it is going the way that it is. Also, something else too, we're going to be looking at other debates just like that, just like this one right here. Guys, John Claymore here. If you like the content, hit the like button, subscribe, share the video, cut the notifications bell on so that way you guys are notified when the videos hit. Make sure you guys, once again, hit that like button, leave a comment in the comment section.